Have you ever made one of those tiny little assumptions that ends up causing a massive disaster? Well, we're going to break down a story from a sound engineer where one small oversight on what seemed like a totally perfect day literally plunged an entire building into darkness. Let's get into it. So that's a quote from the professional sound engineer at the center of our story. He's looking back on a day that went, well, spectacularly wrong. So what exactly was this mistake? And why was it so huge that it changed the way he worked forever? Let's rewind and see how this whole thing unfolded. All right, so our story kicks off with what felt like just another day at the office. A routine gig. And on the surface, everything looked perfectly normal. Almost. Deceptively calm. I mean, look at this setup. Everything seems pretty straightforward, right? The venue, a college campus. The building itself, fairly new. The job was just standard sound for an event, and the place was buzzing with other vendors and assistants. On paper, this was an absolutely ideal situation. And here it is. This is the heart of the problem. Our engineer made one critical assumption. He thought, hey, it's a new building. What could go wrong? See, he normally would check the electrical rooms in older venues, but this time, that modern look, it gave him a false sense of security. It seemed like a smart shortcut, but it would turn out to be a massive mistake. And now, we get to the moment of truth. This is when that false sense of security just completely vanished, and things got very, very real. Okay, so try to picture this. The whole setup is done, the crowd is hyped and ready to go, the energy in the room is electric. The band hits the stage and kicks into their first song, the sound is just pumping. And bam! Just like that, total silence, pitch black. And I don't just mean the stage lights went out, no. The entire building lost power, a complete and total blackout. The absolute worst-case scenario for any live event just happened. So you can just imagine the chaos. In the middle of all that darkness, a frantic search for answers begins. What on earth just happened? Right away, the building supervisor knows exactly what to do. He bolts to the back to reset the circuit, and boom, the lights flicker back on. But this was just a temporary fix. The real mystery was just getting started. And this is where the story gets even deeper. The supervisor walks over to the sound engineer and just drops this bombshell on him. He admits they've had this problem before. This wasn't some random fluke. The building had a pre-existing condition, like a ghost in the machine that nobody had bothered to figure out. So, our engineer, who knows his stuff when it comes to electricity, starts putting the pieces together. It wasn't just his sound system. It was the whole shebang, the lighting rigs, the parcams, the big powered screens, plus all the gear from the other vendors. Everything was plugged in and pulling from the same, very limited power source. He realized they were all asking for way, way too much. Okay, so let's get into the why of it all. What was actually happening behind the scenes? Let's dive into the pretty simple science behind this whole blackout. The problem here was a classic case of what's called an electrical overload. Now, think of an electrical circuit like a highway. It can only handle so many cars at once, right? If you try to shove way too much traffic, or in this case, electricity, through it, you get a massive traffic jam. The whole system just shuts down to protect itself. And the unsung hero, or maybe the party pooper, depending on how you look at it, is the circuit breaker. Its job is actually pretty simple, but totally vital. First, it constantly monitors the flow of electricity. Then, when it detects that the demand is getting dangerously high, it goes into protect mode. It instantly trips and cuts the power. It's a safety feature, and it's what stops the wires from overheating and starting a fire. So, what's the big lesson we can pull from all this? Because this story isn't just about cables and power. It's about a universal truth that applies to, well, pretty much everything we do. Here is the absolute key takeaway. The big, dangerous assumption was that a new building automatically means it's got a perfect, powerful electrical system. And it's an easy trap to fall into, right? Our brains just connect new with reliable. But the harsh reality is that every single system, no matter how new or shiny it looks, has its limits. The lesson here? Always verify your foundation. Never just assume it can handle the load. And that kind of brings us to the final thought I want to leave you with. That sound engineer learned his lesson. Never assume the power grid can handle what you're about to throw at it. So, how about you? In your work, in your projects, even in your life, what are your electrical circuits? What are those critical systems you're depending on without ever actually checking their limits? What's that one unverified assumption that could plunge your world into darkness?